There we go. Okay, all right, so public speaking works just like any other communication, human communication. Okay? Everybody understand what I mean when I say that?
Yes.
Okay, good. 3 people, awfully. I only got 2 other people that were kind of like going. And you can't really tell if that was actually agreement or they're just like going. Okay, I get it. It's Monday, it's Tuesday morning. I even, took a little extra time to get my cup of coffee before we came. Okay, we have a Keurig in the teachers in the staff lounge now, which is awesome. Except somebody won't throw their damn K-Cups away once they use them. Does anything piss you off more than when, racism pisses me off more, but let's not go there. On a short-term basis, when I open the Keurig to put my K-Cup in to make my cup of coffee and there's one already in there that somebody used in the very... It's thoughtless. It's just selfish. It's what's wrong with this country.
There's a lot more wrong than just that.
It's 8 o'clock in the morning. Don't expect me to discuss the ills of the world right off the bat. All right. Okay. So public speaking is just simply a form of communication, right? Okay. We talked about this the other day, about how we're getting bombarded with information, about how technology is overrunning us, about how, so many of us are now, have our smartphones welded to our hands. We've got our laptops open. I read a study the other day where teenagers now generally, when they're not in school or asleep, are consuming as many as 5 different communication channels all at once. On average, they're consuming like 3.2. I mean, how many of you guys have your tablets, have your phone to look at your email, and have the TV turned on all at the same time? I mean, everybody does that now, okay? But we haven't found anything yet that allows technology to really, truthfully replace human communication. Okay, now everybody's seen that thing that I think Siri will now do, can call and make appointments for you. Okay, everybody seen those demonstrations? They've got... it's out there. Look on the internet because they have they actually live had Siri call and make a haircut appointment for the guy that was doing the demonstration. Okay, it was kind of creepy. I'll be honest with you, because the person on the other end had no idea they were talking to us, an iPhone. All right, and then IBM is working on Watson and Deep Blue, where they actually have beat chess masters. I mean, they're developing. That's a compliment from the IBM Corporation right there. Okay, I get $5 every time I say IBM, so they just paid me. Where it's being able to mimic human speech. And certainly, how many of y'all have got that robocall where you pick up the phone and you go hello, and there's this long pause, and you say hello again, and then you get this perky female voice that goes, "Oh, hi, this is Karen. I'm sorry, I had problems with my earphone. Hi, okay." And the first 3 times you hear that, you go, "Oh, yeah, hi, what's going on?" And, suddenly you realize you're talking to a tape recording. Okay? Yeah. Technology can assist. Okay? But right now, technology hasn't been able to replace human communication. How are some ways that we use technology to assist human communication? Your cell phone? What else? Email. Somebody else answer. She's not answering all the questions this semester. Texting, what else? Faxing, what else? TV, what else? Very, very, very 1980s answer. Thank you very much. What else? Voicemail, what else? Radio, what else?
Like apps.
Apps, like what kind of apps?
Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram.
Okay, what else?
Your watch. Electronic watches. E-watches, smart watches.
Okay, where you can look at a lot of those things we've already discussed on your watch. This is a very big watch. It's not very smart though. Okay, it doesn't have any sort of Bluetooth capabilities. What else? One of the things you guys haven't mentioned yet. Video chats like Skype and FaceTime. Okay, it allows you to communicate, but still the technology hasn't replaced the communication. Okay. Second thing you need to remember about human communication, you are going to be judged in the commercial environment by how well you communicate. Period. Okay, how many of y'all seen that movie, The Social Network? Really? Nobody? Okay, it's about Mark Zuckerberg, who became the youngest billionaire in human history. Okay? And it's all about how this guy lost $62 million because he just could not talk to people. Okay? Because he took an idea that was actually thought up by a couple of guys named Winklevoss, that they wanted to do kind of thing that looked kind of like Facebook, only they wanted to do it only for Harvard, or MIT, where he was going to Harvard, and he took it and made Facebook out of it, became a billionaire. He's now worth $60 billion. But these two guys sued him, and he was so incapable of communicating within the depositions that he had to ultimately lost the court case. Even though he may or may not have been right, he was so bad at communicating because he's one of those guys. He's a Sheldon Cooper sort of guy. I mean, back when Sheldon Cooper was funny. Everybody know who Sheldon Cooper is? Okay, great. I got to make Big Bang Theory references to get a reaction. Okay? All right? But, I mean, he just could not communicate. Like I said from square one, studies have shown over and over again that you get paid more if you communicate well. Okay? So that's another reason why we study human communication. And this is why we speak in public. Okay? To inform, to persuade, and entertain. We're going to go into each of those general purposes for a public speech in great detail later on in the course. Okay? But right now, you just need to know if you're going to stand up here in front of people, you are going to be informing them, persuading them, or entertaining them. Now, is it possible to do more than one at a time?
Yes.
Okay? Like, hopefully, I'm informative and a little entertaining. Okay, the dead eyes show that maybe not, but okay, we'll move on. Okay, when you go to a job interview, what are you trying to do?
Persuade.
You're trying to persuade them to hire you. Okay, you're selling yourself. Any sales job is just persuasion, right? And how many times do you actually respond to when somebody sends you an email, when you get spam and you look at it and you go, hey, wow, really I needed a water purifying system. And you buy it off of an email that you got. Never. Persuasion is person to person. Okay? When I was back in the old days when people would actually say, I guess they still do, when they would send out mailers, when you would mass mail something out to tens of thousands of people to try to get them to maybe donate money to I get them all the time from the American Legion. Okay, I'm a member of the American Legion, and literally once a month I get an offer for, $35, and we'll send you a free pocket knife. Okay, like I need a pocket knife. Okay, anybody got any idea what percentage of those things get responded to? Yeah, a successful program gets 3%. You're like a guru if you a savant in mass mailings if you can get 4% of people to respond. Okay, persuasion especially works on eye-to-eye contact. Even if sometimes if that eye-to-eye contact. Anybody remember when Bill Clinton was president? Anybody remember what happened to Bill Clinton when he was president? What happened to Bill Clinton when he was president? What's he going to be remembered? What's going to be the first, second line? Former President Bill Clinton died today. His administration was derailed by
his involvement with Monica Lewinsky.
He had an affair with a White House intern in the Oval Office. And if you want to have a good laugh, flip back to the early 1990s and find out what Bill Clinton did. Bill Clinton stood in front of the American people for 9 straight months and lied. Okay? Lied like a cheap rug, I'll tell you. And he finally got caught. But Bill Clinton stepped in front of the cameras one night and he said, my fellow Americans, I have sinned against you. I have sinned against my family. I have sinned against the American people, and I am sorry. And you want to know what people did? People went, yeah, okay, it's fine. We're all right with it. 30 minutes earlier, people wanted to literally have him thrown out of office. The Republicans were trying to impeach him, and it looked like they were going to impeach him. And I will tell you, I watched this speech, and he got up there, and I went, I'm going to do better. I'm going to make you proud of me as President of the United States. And after 15 minutes, I'm going like, all right, he's not that bad. Okay? Because he had the ability, probably President Reagan and President Clinton had the ability more than anybody else in this country in the last, well, ever, because television didn't exist before then, had the ability to look into a TV lens and make you feel like they were talking to you personally. Okay? Barack Obama had the ability to stand up and look very dignified and very passionate. But he still did not have that ability to look down a camera lens and make you feel like he was talking to you personally. Politically, I didn't like Bill Clinton. But I will tell you, as a communicator, I had nothing but respect for the guy. Okay? Because he had the ability to turn mass communication and focus it on human communication. So, there's a couple of things. What do you have to have for humans to communicate? What's the most basic requirements for human communication? More than one person? What else?
Your mouth to speak.
Okay, but do we need a mouth to speak? Well, no, you can have a keyboard to type. Okay. What else do you need?
An idea of what to say.
You got to have something to say. Eye contact, isn't that really necessary? It's preferred for public speaking. You have to at least, we'll stress here, you have to at least give the impression of eye contact. You don't have to have eye contact. But if you're texting someone, do you have eye contact? Unless you send a picture with a mirror. Okay? Okay? My kids hate the fact that when I upgraded to an iPhone 7, I now can do a photo right from I got that photo button where I can just don't even have to get out of text messaging, and I can take a picture of the dog and send it to them. Okay? What else do you need? So we've said we've got a participant, we got to have a message, but we've already sort of talked around it. What else do we need? An audience, that's part of the participants. We're sort of talked around what is email, what is texting, what is public speaking. What? Okay.
Forum, platform.
A platform, let's call it a channel. Okay? And what do we need to really have communication? Even though we got two people standing there, what do we really need to have communication? Can I just talk to you? I mean, how many of y'all have seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off? But we all know this Ben Stein scene where he's going like, Bueller, and then later on you see him again where he's going like, this was called the what curve? The what Laffer curve. He didn't care that anybody was there. All right? So we have to have some way to communicate back. So let's go through these 4 things individually. First of all, you have to have 2 or more participants. Okay? That is your first basic requirement. Can I talk to myself? Can I have a conversation with myself? Can I really? Okay. Can you verbalize thoughts? Yeah, you can verbalize thoughts. I do that all the time. My wife just did. Well, I don't do it. I haven't done it in about 15 years because when we were living we had a small house in Maryland that we lived in, and I would be sitting there talking to myself, and my wife would hear me mumbling and get up and walk to the other end of the house and say, "Were you talking to me?" "Oh, no, I was just talking to myself." Yeah, she broke me of that habit. Okay? But if we're verbalizing our conversation, we're just verbalizing our thoughts. We're not truly talking to ourselves. We're just verbalizing thoughts we already had. When I was doing at the National Security Agency where I worked for 22 years, I did about 4 years working in security, where we did background investigations, counterintelligence investigations, things like that. And one of the things we did was when we would do background investigations on a lot of people that had issues, we'd hear that they would talk to themselves, so people thought they were crazy. Okay, so I went in, we'd go in and talk to the psychologists, and they would go say the same thing over and over again. Talking to yourself is not a sign of psychosis as long as you control both ends of the conversation. If you are having a conversation and in your head and you don't know what the other guy's going to say, that's not a conversation, that's a mental illness. Okay? Now, prayer. Is that talking to yourself where you talk and you listen and God and you have a conversation? Yeah, I just threw that out there. We're not going to answer that question. Okay? But it oftentimes comes up. If you truly are engaging with a higher being, a deity, and they are having a conversation with you, that's two participants. Okay? That's still not intrapersonal communication. All right, everybody understand? Okay, so you got to have, and the participants, how many participants got to be knowing participants? Okay? I'm not going to pick on our early enrollment people in here because they're teenagers, and I know how, when their parents are talking, I know for a fact they're not always listening. Okay? How many of y'all got kids? Do your kids always listen when you talk? Are you having a conversation? No, you're not. You're not communicating. We're going to talk about the difference between listening and hearing later on in the class. But parents, how many of you have walked into your child's room, seen a mess, stood 3 feet from them and gone, I want this room cleaned up in 15 minutes. You turn around and walk out, you come back in, 15 minutes later, that child has not moved. And you look at them and say, well, what the hell? I told you to clean this place up. And they go, when did you do that? 15 minutes ago when I walked in here and stood right here. Okay? And as parents, we develop, techniques to make sure that our children are participating in the conversation that we're having with them. And what's the biggest one? Using all three names. Okay? Because when I was growing up, I went by my middle name, which was Lee. And I could hear, somebody in the back of the house would be yelling, Lee. Was not phased. I was not participating in that conversation. Okay? Lee McInnes, I was still not participating in that conversation. Victor Lee McInnes, okay, now I'm aware of what's going on in the house, and I'm aware that probably I may not know what, but I have done something wrong. Okay? Everybody understand that? We will call that, when we're giving a public speech, an attention device. Okay? And we use an attention device to make sure all the participants that we want engaged in our communication are engaged in the communication. Okay? Second thing we talked about is we have to have a message. We have to have something we want to communicate. An idea, a thought, an emotion. Something that we want to communicate. It can be verbal, emails, text messages, or all verbal. Okay? Do not confuse verbal with vocal. Verbal means made up of words. Okay? It can be visual. I visually communicate on I-20 on a fairly regular basis. Or is the other person a knowing participant? Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. I drive my pickup truck has a diesel engine, so sometimes I have trouble catching up with them and visually communicating. Okay? But, occasionally somebody will cut me off and then wind up in the lane and, they wind up slowing down and I'm like, I won't show you the exact gestures I make because that would be inappropriate because I'm a professional. It can also be, now, a lot of people are going to tell you, you're going to see these surveys that in human communication, 60% of communication is nonverbal and 40% is verbal. Y'all have all heard those statistics, right? They're wrong, so don't worry about it. Because there can be times when human communication is 100% nonverbal. Okay? There can be times as well when human communication is 100% verbal. It all depends on the situation, and there's no way to make it. They're related, but you can't break them down like that. Now, encoding and decoding is not digital. Everybody knows how a computer works, right? A computer is really not that. Even the most complex computer in the world is not that smart. It's a 1 or a 0. It's a yes or a no. And all a computer does is answer millions and millions of times a second, whether or not it's a yes or a no answer. Everybody familiar with that? Okay? Human language does not work that way. And we're going to discuss in detail in a couple of minutes how that is. But you need to remember that. You need to really work and strive for the fact that the message you're putting out may not be the message that's getting received. And there can be a million different things that can impact on that. We need a channel. You guys said, I think you said a platform. Okay? We're going to call that in the communication world a channel. It's the means and methods of passing your message. And it can be sound, it can be visual. Okay? Visual. How many of y'all have ever driven a car in a foreign country where English was not the primary language? Where were you?
Germany.
Germany, where were you?
Europe.
Europe, where were you?
Mexico.
Mexico, okay. In each of those countries, you come upon a red octagonal sign with a white border around the edges and some sort of language written in the middle. What does that word in the middle mean? Stop. Yeah, even if you're driving in Bahrain, or even if you're driving in Iraq, even if you're driving in China, internationally, we all know a red sign with 8 sides and a white band around the outside of it. No matter what's written in the middle, you're supposed to stop there, right? Do we all get that? Is that effective communication? That is purely 100% visual communication. You do not need somebody out there translating it for you. You understand what that means. Okay, if it's a triangular sign that's hung upside down with the point at the bottom, what does that mean to you? That means yield. Means if you go without slowing down, you're going to see what happened out there on the highway this morning. Okay? Red light means, green light means, yellow light means, floor it and try to get through the light before it turns red. Which was probably what happened out here on the highway this morning. Okay? You have to have some, and again, the channels that you can use are probably too numerous to count. And we all come up with it, and I used to throw it out, but I mean, I had a guy come up one time and said, anybody know what a heliograph is? A heliograph is and I actually knew what it was, and the guy was kind of upset because he thought he was going to stump me. But a heliograph is where you set up a series of mirrors on high points and you use the sun's reflections to send Morse code. Okay? That's a channel. It's still just conveying a message. All right? There's innumerable, I won't say infinite because that's not true, but there is, it would be difficult for us to go through and really count every channel. Okay, but your channel is nothing more than the means you use to pass your message. And then you have to have feedback. In just a second, we're going to talk about dialogic theory. Okay? If I'm sitting here just talking, and I'm not paying any attention to you, are we communicating? No. We may be, but I won't know. Okay? Because I could look, if I've got 21 people in here and everyone is asleep, I don't have knowing participants. And the only way I can assure we have 2 knowing participants is if we have some sort of a feedback process. Do you have feedback when you're talking one-on-one? How many of y'all have, I'm going to assume since everybody in here is at least 17 years old, okay, that you've been involved in some sort of a relationship with a significant other, and you've been having a conversation that wasn't necessarily pleasant, and right in the middle of when you're speaking, the other person goes, okay? And you just stop and you go, what was that? And what do they always say? I didn't say nothing. Okay? Did that person communicate non-verbally to you that they're kind of tired of what you're saying and they want to move on? Okay? So it doesn't have to be verbal. So when one-on-one we have feedback. Do I get feedback from you guys? No. Yeah, we're struggling today. That was true. Yes, that is the correct answer part of the time. That's why I do all this stupid, like I said, when I'm fully mobile and I have both my hands, and I'm not tied to PowerPoint. I move all over the place to keep people, just to mix things up so that people will stay focused. So knowing that I have knowing participants. What about mass communication? What about when a politician stands up and pays millions of dollars to run commercials? Do they get feedback on that? How do they get feedback? Votes is the obvious one. One of the first thing that they report on every day of the week, all the time now. Public opinion polls.
Their opponent making a commercial against them.
Your opponent making a commercial. Hey, I saw his commercial and he's a liar. Okay, yeah, there's that. Okay? Watch the news tonight. I guarantee you the first thing they're going to start off with is how many people support the government shutdown and how many don't.
If you're like in a building and they have an intercom and it's like talking to everybody, would that be considered like communication, feedback, between?
So that's a bit more difficult. That's where technology begins to interfere with, you can't say technology begins to interfere with public communication or with human communication, because I can think, I used to be a disc jockey. When I was in college during beer money, I worked as a disc jockey. And there was one day when I thought I had a rockin' show going, and about 45 minutes into it, the engineer comes walking and he goes, "You realize we're not transmitting, right?" I thought I was cooking, man. I thought the people of Starkville, Mississippi were rocking out to my golden, tones and the wonderful music I was playing. And he comes in and just goes, "Yeah, we're not transmitting, right? The transmitter went offline about it 45 minutes ago." And I'm like going, "You mean I enjoyed it, okay?" But you're right. That's a good question. If you're talking if you're on a public address system, do you know that you're communicating with anyone? No, you don't until you get feedback. Okay. The question is, if a tree falls in a forest and nobody's there to hear it, does it make any sound? Well, yeah, it makes sound. It compresses airways, but if nobody's there to react to it, there is no sound. Okay. So you've got to make sure that you get feedback. Now, as the initiator of that communication, you're like sitting there going, "I just had a question. Stop talking to me." I understand that right now. Okay? But if you have something you need to tell everyone, and you just speak over the loudspeaker, and there have been instances where I've been where the people who's on the PA system isn't even in the building, so they don't even know if it actually worked. What is your responsibility and your task at that point to make sure you had effective communication?
Well, I can't answer that, but I feel like the intercom I feel like you're communicating with people. If you come over the intercom and say the building is on fire, I'm pretty sure you're gonna see people running out the building. So you
Okay.
got to do something.
But what if I'm in building 100 down here in the admin building, and I find out that there's a fire alarm in the 1100 building, and I get on the intercom and I say, "There's a fire," push the 1100, 1200 building button. And I say, "There's a fire in building 1100 and 1200. We need everybody to evacuate." Okay? What is my next requirement as someone who initiated that communication? Find out whether or not the PA system worked. And how do I do that? Go over there, get a security guy with a radio to go over there, get on the phone to see if the phones are working, because you can't guarantee that you've communicated until you get feedback. Okay? Right? Everybody good?
Yes, sir.
Okay? Oh man, I got plenty of time. Woo, I can tell you. Okay, when I was a freshman at Mississippi State University, okay, I was Mississippi State. My daughter is currently a junior at Mississippi State. I love Mississippi State, second favorite college for me, behind Auburn. I love that school. But most of the buildings when I went there were built in the 1890s, and had not been updated. Okay, most of them they didn't have whiteboards. They didn't even have blackboards. They still had slate boards. Big pieces of gray slate that you wrote on. So when you hit it with a chalk, it sounded like a shot went off in that room. Okay, I was taking, History of Everything Part 1. You know that. If you haven't seen it already, at all four-year universities, they have a course that's got 350 people crammed into one room. And the guy comes in and just talks about, the Greeks. Well, this guy had this tendency, and he would do this. He would walk back and forth. His lectern was right in the middle of the room. He glances his note as he walked by. He'd keep walking. He'd walk all the way over to the right side of the stage. Then he'd start walking back. He never looked at he'd just glance over, and he'd glance, and he'd look at his notes, and he'd glance, I guess, just to make sure that there were people still in the room. And he would turn around, and he did that for 90 minutes. He got his steps in, okay? But we were bored as hell. So there was 5 of us in there that were all communications majors, and we were taking a communications course that delved in great depth into nonverbal communication. So one of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to see if we could modify his behavior by giving him feedback. So, and he was always 5 minutes late, so we got in there and we said, okay, listen, everybody, don't be really, don't be obvious about it. Be very casual. But what we want to do is as he heads to the right side of the stage, we want you to completely disengage. Put your pencils down, lean back, stare at the ceiling. There was a bank of windows, stare out the windows. Act like you're not participating in the class anymore. And as he comes to the left-hand side of the stage, we want you to lean forward. We want you to furrow your brow like you're really engaged. We want you to start taking notes, even if you're just writing down what you want to have for lunch. We want you to really make eye contact with him. Okay? And we want you to lean forward in your seat. Not a lot. Okay? And then as he goes back over to the right-hand side of the stage, again, disengage. Lean back, stare out the window, put your pencils down. Don't everybody do it all at once. It's not like 100, 350 people leaning forward. Okay? Be careful about it. We had to stop. The next time we went into class, everybody was going like, wow. Because after 90 minutes, the guy would not go to the right-hand side of the stage anymore. Okay? He would walk out to his notes, look at his notes, and then turn back around. And you could tell the guy was hideously uncomfortable. He didn't seem to understand what was going on, but he knew something was going on, and he was doing better over here. Over here. So we went in and told, the next class, we just went, everybody stopped because we may get this guy nervous breakdown. For all we know, by the end of the second time we did it, he'd be over here lecturing, and he'd talk until he ran out of stuff to talk to. He'd run back to his lectern and look at it, and then run back over there. We said, we can't have that happen. Sooner or later, we're going to get arrested. Okay? So does anybody have any questions about the 4 parts of human communication? The 4 requirements, the 4 things you have to have. You have to have at least 2 knowing participants. You have to have a message. You have to have a channel to communicate. And you have to have feedback. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So I've said already multiple times in this class that there is very little new in this field of study, okay, that we've come up with. We've been talking about human communication for, and this is no joke, coming up on about 3,000 years. Okay? Aristotle in about 350 BC came up with this model of public speaking. You have a speaker, you have a speech, you have the occasion, but he considered the occasion to be very secondary. You have the audience, and then you have the effect. Okay? Now, this is a perfectly functioning model that works in today. In modern America, this is a perfectly functional model because I know how it's perfectly functional because in 1978, a guy named Lasswell made millions of dollars with this model. Okay? Now, he applied it to the public relations field, but I want you to look. He's got a communicator, a message, a medium, a receiver, and the effect. Compare that to Aristotle's model. The only thing he's really changed is some of the terminology and what we would call the medium he used, the channel he used to communicate. Aristotle called it the occasion and considered it of secondary importance. Lasswell has moved it and called it the medium and made it a principal part of the conversation, of the model. Okay? Lasswell's model, again, it's just a knockoff of Aristotle's model from 2,500 years earlier. It works. It still meets all our criteria, but you really have to bend the effect a lot because the effect will take the place of feedback. Okay, if we're talking about advertising, and Lasswell put this out for a public relations model, what's the feedback we're going to get from the other participants in our communication? So if I'm running an ad, okay, people are going to spend, I think I heard $3.5 million for a 30-second ad during the Super Bowl this year. If I'm going to spend my $3.5 million to get my 30-second spot on the Super Bowl, okay? So my communicator, I'm the Anheuser-Busch Corporation. My message is really cute horses, buy beer. The medium is going to be television during the Super Bowl. The receiver is going to be the 100 million people that would be watching that show live. What's the effect I'm looking for? People will buy beer. Okay? So the effect will serve as our feedback. If we begin to note whatever metrics we want to achieve, if we see that effect happening, then we know that our communication was effective. If we do not see it happen, we know that it was ineffective. Everybody understand that? Everybody? Okay? So even though feedback isn't explicitly fed into this, both Aristotle and Laswell, 2,000 years apart, understood the fact that the audience has to be involved in the conversation in some way. Okay? So that is even applying our 4 basic pieces: participants, message, channel, and feedback into a mass communication model. And again, that's not a new model. All right, so one of the things that had to be included that people started, and again, it was the models up to Laswell brought Aristotle back until the 1940s. After World War II, there was a ton of sociological and psychological research done on communication. Before the 1940s, communication models, especially public speaking models, were basically sender-receiver. Okay? Everybody understand what I mean by that? I talk, you listen, that's it. And basically, if you look even where you're at right now, the Western European educational model was built on that concept. I talk, you listen, you get a degree when you're done. Everybody see what I'm talking about there? Okay? And there's a lot of, I will tell you, there's a lot of people in the educational field that still believe that. How many of y'all have had professors where I talk, you listen, maybe we'll entertain questions at the end of the lecture? Okay? All right? But then people started talking about what's called the dialogic theory. What do you think dialogic theory is? All communication, what? Both parties have to be involved in the communication. There has to be some sort of way for there to be a conversation. Human communication, how many of y'all, human communication is basically a dialogue and not a monologue. Everybody know what a monologue is? What? One person talking. Okay? The only person I know of that I engage with on a regular basis that are really dedicated to that monologue concept is my mother-in-law. And that woman will just talk. She doesn't like me. I don't like her. Okay? She will just, there will be times when, we're in a room by ourselves, which hasn't happened. I haven't seen her in 15 years, so it doesn't happen all that often. Well, okay, I have seen her in 15 years. This is my in-laws. They live in Vermont. Everybody know where Vermont is? We lived in Florida. I thought that was enough distance. We got a call. We just passed to Jacksonville. We're going to be at your house in 3 hours. They had been driving for 3 days. Yeah. And they gave us 3 hours notice. And I couldn't believe that I just sat there through the whole visit going.
Like they really is.
Yeah. And my mother-in-law got me, we were in a room by ourselves one time. And, my wife made the huge mistake of leaving. She may have had to go to the bathroom. I don't care. That's not my problem. Okay. And she just started telling me about all the mistakes I've made in my life. And I'm just like sitting there going. She did. For all I know, she's got gills because I didn't hear her stop to breathe. Okay, but there has to be some sort of engagement. Okay, public speaking is a dialogue between the speaker and the audience, even if the audience isn't immediately available to them. Okay. When I was a disc jockey, I used to have people come up to me and they would say, "Hey, how you doing? This is my friend." And again, when I was in college, I was going by Lee McInnes. I said, "This is my friend Lee McInnes." They're going like, "You're not the Lee McInnes that works at WKOR, are you?" And I was going like, "Yeah, I worked there sometimes." And they're going like, "Oh, you play the crappiest music." And I'm like, "Okay, all right, that's fine. But that's a dialogue." Okay? It also means that meanings are in people, not in words. And we're going to talk about encoding and decoding again. I brought that up already because the words don't mean the same things to the same people. Okay? That also goes for nonverbal communication. Anybody in here, nobody been to Japan? Okay. Well, if I did that to you, if you said something and I went, what does that mean? It means okay. If you do that in Japan, you're going to get punched. I'm not going to tell you what it means because that would be inappropriate for me to say. It's an obscene gesture. Okay? I don't know the cultural background to it. All I know is we were working with some Japanese troops in Afghanistan, and I was told going in that do not do that under any circumstances. They will get very upset. Okay? If you say to an Arab or someone who speaks Arabic, okay, you have horns. In several countries, well, at least up until a few years ago, in a couple of countries in the Middle East, they could actually kill you for saying that. Because the phrase "you have horns" in Arabic means you prostitute your mother. Okay? And that's, believe it or not, that's a bit of an insult. Okay?
Just a little bit.
Yeah, well, also, if you want to insult, this is really any Muslim, but especially those from the Middle East. When a politician wants to show that he really is paying attention to you, you'll do the two-hand grab on the handshake. You'll shake with the right hand, and then you'll put the left hand on top of it. That is a massive insult to an Arab. Don't ever do that. And again, the reason is it's kind of disgusting, and I'm not going to tell you. But just don't ever do that. And if you're in the United Kingdom or Australia, New Zealand, most of the Commonwealth, what does that mean?
Here?
No, in the United Kingdom. That means F off. Okay?
Wow.
Yeah, it's the same thing as if there was one fewer fingers here in the United States. I'm not going to actually do that because that would be inappropriate and unprofessional. Okay? But you can figure it out. You'll probably use this very gesture with one less finger on the roads of Aiken County, South Carolina. Okay? The context of that goes all the way back to the Battle of Agincourt, Henry V. Okay? The French had told the one weapon, the weapon of mass destruction of the day was the English longbowman, who could punch through armor from 500 yards. And the French said that when we win this battle, we're going to take all your bowmen and we're going to cut their fingers off. Okay, we're going to cut their bow fingers off. So after the French lost the battle and they're being marched out, and the prisoners are being marched out between the ranks of the English troops, all the bowmen are standing there like that, showing them that they still have their fingers. Okay? And I will tell you, there was a couple of times when we were traveling in France where I nearly got in a fight. Okay? By doing that. I thought it was just, you flip somebody off here, nobody's going to come at you. They're going to yell at you, but rarely, if ever, you're going to get, if you flip somebody off, they're immediately going to come running at you. But there we pulled up in a toll booth, which was supposed to be exact change. The guy on the motorcycle has to get off and start digging through his saddlebags, and I'm like sitting there stuck in traffic. And he looks back at me, and I just went, and he started coming back at the car, and I'm like going, You know, I'm in a car. I'm in a big-ass American car, minivan. He's on foot on a motorcycle. My wife is going to go, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm running his ass over if he gets Okay? I don't care if he's French. He's getting run over. Okay? Context and social situations impact perceived meanings. Okay? So, if I walked up to you and I said, hey, what kind of car do you drive?
Inaccurate.
Okay, so, but if I walked up and said,
Dude, what kind of car do you drive? Inaccurate.
that just really, yeah. Okay, I was going to say it got creepy, then suddenly got really creepy. Okay? But the social situations and the context can impact on your perceived meanings. All right? If you go to the enrollment center and they sit there and they look at you and they say, can I have your social security number? What are you going to do?
Wow.
Well, you're going to ask why, but you're probably going to give them most cases, you're going to go, if they go, what's your social? Okay? You're going to give them your social. Okay? If you go up, if you're at a doctor's office and they say, can we see your insurance card and your driver's license? What are you going to do? You're going to hand them your driver's license and your insurance card. If you're at Walmart and somebody walks up to you and says, can I see your driver's license and insurance card? What are you going to do? You're going to run get security because this guy's freaking you out, okay? All right, so we have to accept the fact that social situations and context impact things. The key impacts for public speaking is even public speaking, even on a mass scale, is a dialogue. It's not a monologue. Language is not digital. Encoding and decoding is not perfect. Context and social situations are important. There is a physical dimension to this. There has to be. Okay? Biggest audience I spoke to in not using mass communication, not using some sort of technology other than a loudspeaker, it was about 8,000 people. Okay? That completely changes the dynamic of the conversation, right? Okay, because now not only, in here, I can look around and I can make eye contact with individuals and I can see how individuals are reacting. When you're talking about addressing people in a basketball arena at Auburn University, they become a mass. Okay? And there's also a cultural dimension, which we've already discussed. So what that says is the speaker has to be able to adapt to a whole lot of different things. Now, we've talked about encoding and decoding a lot. Let's look at that real quick. Okay, how many of y'all have ever been in, again, we're going to talk about you having a conversation with your parents, your boss, your significant other, and you look at them and you just go, I just cannot put what I'm feeling into words. Okay? That's a pretty common human event, right? So what happens is, as a participant in communication, we have this message. Okay? It's an emotion, it's a thing, it's something we want to communicate. And the only way how do we communicate that? Through what? We communicate it through language. We have to have some sort of a language. And it has to be a mutually agreed upon language. All right, for those of y'all who have traveled in a foreign country, did you speak German when you were in Germany?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, a little bit. Okay? Because, and I've been in countries where I didn't have, my Arabic is not that good anymore, traveling in the Middle East, traveling in France, my high school French did not do me a lot of good. Okay? Traveling in Malta, we spent a week in Malta, and Maltese is a bizarre combination of Sicilian, Italian, and Arabic. It is a bizarre language that is really had a lot of fun listening to. But you have to come across an agreed upon language, or you can't communicate. For those of you who traveled outside the United States and you didn't speak, you eventually come up with, I need gas for my car, and you go, petrol pour l'auto. And then we go, and you get gas, okay? My favorite one was, I showed my kids were really impressed by this. One of the phrases I knew going into France was, je voudrais, I want, okay? So I walked into the kids saw this restaurant, we've been in France for a week, we said, okay, it was a McDonald's. Je voudrais la Happy Meal number 1. Okay, and they're like, well, Dad, you speak French. Okay, all right? So we have to encode it. Then we pass it to them through some sort of channel. Spoken. And when you speak, that is a channel, because what speaking does is actually compress airwaves so that it hits your tympanic membrane, your eardrum. And so we compress airwaves, we send it electronically, and then it goes to the audience. And then what do they have to do? They have to decode it. Okay? Is that precise? I got a real tentative yes. I got a less tentative no. Not always is the future governor of the state of South Carolina right there, ladies and gentlemen. The ultimate politician. Sometimes. Okay? It depends, which is actually the right answer. Okay? We try to make it as precise as possible. Okay? Let me ask you a question. What would you call that? It's a chair. What would you call that?
You're going to sit in one chair and put your feet up in the other.
Okay, so if I told you we had a high chair sitting behind the podium up here, what would you think was up here? Okay? You would call both of these chair, right? Are these the same thing?
Essentially.
Essentially. But if I walked in, if somebody stole all the chairs in here, and I went down to the guys in physical plant, and I said, hey, I need 25 new chairs. Stand up and take your chair with you. And you walk into class, go ahead and have a seat. You said they were essentially the same thing. Do we have a problem?
Yeah.
I'm glad the guy up front said they're essentially the same thing, because
Difference is height.
well, you know,
That's the thing.
yeah, the difference between me and Shaquille O'Neal is height. He's worth $400 million. I'm worth about $9.27. And the only difference between me and him is height, talent, dedication.
It's like 3 things.
Yeah, that's all. It's 3 minor things. It's not and even when we take something as simple as chair. I need a chair. Okay, what if somebody stole all the chairs and I said, hey, listen, I need a chair. And they said, well, how good of chairs do you need? So it doesn't need to be great, just basic chairs. And they ran down to Academy Sports and got 21 canvas folding chairs that had them in here. Okay? Hey, they were only $6 each. You said anything would be fine. Okay, I needed something that worked in the classroom. Oh, well, now you're adding details. Okay? So even when you've got something like chair, what if I used a phrase like toothache? Does everybody know what a toothache is? Do we all agree? Does a toothache keep you from going to work?
Depending on the severity.
Depending on the severity, but the phrase toothache doesn't necessarily tell you that. If you call your boss and say, I got a cold, the word cold doesn't mean anything. It can mean I've got a little sniffles, or I'm just a train wreck and I can't even get up the stairs. Okay? But let's start talking about things that have a much more. What does the word mother mean? What? Caretaker. That's a good answer. What else does it mean? Does mother mean the same thing to everyone? Does it mean the same thing to everyone all the way through their lives? Okay? There are people in this room, when I say the word mother, okay, they invoke totally positive feelings. Okay? My mom passed away about 2 years ago. Right now, when you say mother, I have a very warm, sentimental feeling. 5 years ago, when my mother was 90 years old and just said whatever the hell she wanted, okay, God bless her. And again, there's that cultural in thing. Hey, if everybody in here is from, well, you at least live in South Carolina or Georgia. If somebody says God bless you, God bless them. Okay, that's not. Okay? That's that cultural context. Okay? All right, but there are people who, when I say the word mother, they feel anger. Okay? Because their relationship with their mother was driven by that. What if I say liberty or freedom? There are people in this room that may justifiably say, yeah, that's a scam. You don't really have freedom in this country. You're dictated to by the business. Okay? And then if I said police, President of the United States. Okay? All those words have different meanings, although even we say English is a fairly precise language. All those words involve encoding and decoding. And you've got to take into account in dialogic theory that how your audience decodes your message may be radically different than the way what you intended when you initially encoded it. Am I right? Okay. Where's our veterans? Okay, your Army? Army?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I had a retired NCO in here last semester who in his first speech used the phrase, "you females," 4 times. Okay? Now, you two guys know and I know that in the Army, that's okay. You hear that a lot. It may not be okay, but you hear it a lot. And you're not going to shoot somebody for using the phrase, "you females." I took him to the side and said, "Hey, listen, you got to stop that." He's going like, "But I was considered the best briefer on the Korean Peninsula." And I was, and I'm like going, "You're not on the Korean Peninsula. You're not in the Army anymore. And in the regular world, we don't use phrases like 'you females.' If you want to address the women in the group, that's fine, but you need to address it like that. Your phrase does not work in this cultural context." Clear?
Yep.
Questions about that? Okay, so let's look at some models. Okay? The first model that we're going to look at is one of the most basic. Was done by Shannon and Weaver. This is some of the first products of public speaking that came out after 1949. And really a lot of the social research that came out after World War II were driven by the fact that how the hell did Hitler get away with it? Okay? People began to wonder and they wanted to build a model. This is Shannon and Weaver, which I swear to you would be a great name for a morning radio team. Hi, I'm Shannon and I'm Weaver. Okay? They weren't. They were sociology researchers. Okay? Basic model. Sender, receiver, feedback, message. It's got all your parts. Got your 4 basic parts. And I will post I will not normally post my PowerPoint slides online on Blackboard, but I will post all these models so you don't have to write them all down. And usually when I'm doing it on the whiteboard, I draw them really basically. I had to do some screen caps on some models, and they get a little bit more complex. So I will post them for you. Okay? All right, this attracts everybody. Everybody loves this model. Because why? Because it's real simple, isn't it? It's really easy to follow. And is it accurate? Yeah. I mean, it's sorta. It is. It's anything that's really simple. When you're dealing with a complex situation, is usually going to be wrong. There's going to be more exceptions than there are, things where it actually applies to. But it does actually work. Okay? It's got your 4 basic parts. It doesn't allow for, environmental issues. It doesn't allow for cultural context. Okay? Now, the next model that came out was called the ABX model. And a guy named Newcomb brought it out in 1953. It adds a little bit more. It shows that the big changes to this was that it showed that there was an engagement between for some reason he started the model over here on the right side. But the communication is initiated by A, or the public speaker. This is the receiver. It does allow for, these 2 arrows show that there is ongoing communication between the 2. Okay, if you go back to the linear model, it's sender sends to receiver, receiver feedback, sender sends to receiver, receiver feeds back. Okay, it doesn't look like that's a very static process. This allows for the process to be moving back and forth. And X in this case, though it says topic there, is really more of the social environment that you're working in. Okay, this starts bringing more of dialogic theory into our public speaking models. Okay? A little bit more complex. Then we started talking about Osgood and Schramm the next year came out with the interactional model. Okay? This is much more dynamic. This gives the both, in this case, you notice they don't even label which side is the public speaker. Okay? Does everybody see that? You don't have a sender-receiver relationship anymore. You've just got two people engaged in communication. Right? They put in encoding and decoding. They have each. So and here's one thing that really throws people off sometimes. Let's assume this is the speaker and this is the audience. A lot of people assume a lot of the time that the audience doesn't have a message. Does the audience have a message? Yeah, absolutely. The message I'm getting from some of you guys right now is, oh, this is dragging. Okay? And you're communicating to me that, let's move on. Okay? But now do you see more and more dialogic theories beginning to work into things, and we're making this more of a conversation, even though it's a public speaking environment? Got to turn the page, make sure I know what I want to say next. Okay. Then in 1970, a guy named Barnlund came up with what for a long time was the standard. And it was called the transactional model. Okay? And this looks really basic because of this graphic, but it's a lot more complex than it really looks like. Because not only are you taking into the fact that there is one speaker and multiple, and some of the, I will tell you, some of the diagrams you see on this thing are just, Barnlund's diagram of it was just stupid. Okay, and I mean that, we'll talk about your connotative and denotative meanings by stupid. I mean, it was so incredibly complex, it's very hard to explain. Because what this basically says is that this speaker is engaging in a conversation with each one of the receivers individually. Okay? At some level. And that each of those receivers, both individually and as a group, are in a conversation with the speaker. And they are taking place in a cultural context and a physical environment. Now, this is, looks like a class or something like that. Within that cultural context, what is the appropriate ways, and just like, let's say this is a Chamber of Commerce meeting, because I don't want you guys to feel like I'm, trying to force you into a certain communication model, or I don't, want to prescribe your actions in this class. Within this type of formal public speaking event, what are the acceptable ways, socially acceptable ways for the receivers or the audience to have a conversation with the speaker? Raise your hand. What? Nonverbal, what, gestures?
Yeah, nonverbal gestures, like nodding if they actually paying attention.
Oh, I thought you were talking about, you son of a bitch. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we don't really think that it's appropriate in this environment. I mean, if this is let's say this is a worship service. Okay. You rarely, if ever, see anybody in the middle of church jump up and you say, "Is that the way you're interpreting that verse? Oh, my Lord." And then they storm out of the room. That's not socially acceptable. Then people don't worry about what the interpretation was. They're going like, what the hell happened to Bob? Okay? All right? So Barnlund's model acknowledges that there are social constraints and social context for public speaking events. So we have to engage at that level and understand that. Okay? I have had students in the past jump up, well, they didn't jump up, they just say, "You're an ass." Okay? And I will go, "Okay, let's discuss it." They really get shocked when I don't know what they expect me to do. Okay? I have students that will interrupt me during lectures and just disagree with me. Okay? Is that accepted? Well, it depends a lot on the instructor. A lot of instructors, especially if you go to a 4-year institution where it's a tenure track professor who knows he can't be fired, he'll tell you to get out. He or she does not want you talking about, engaging with them in class. Okay? I'm totally different. I'm okay with it. Well, as long as we're all polite and respectful. Okay? Now, In 1967, a guy named Dance came up with a model called the helical model. Okay? And he had, and I added these arrows just to make sure that Dance didn't put those in there. But I think it illustrates the point a little bit better. So you've got participant 1 and participant 2. I don't say sender receiver. Dance didn't say sender receiver. You've got 2 people participating in a conversation. P1 says something, participant 1 starts the conversation, or a conversation is initiated, and then people begin to engage in conversation. Every engagement in that conversation changes the social context. All right? So you then, when P2 reacts to it and goes back to P1, when P1 says something, P2 is altered. It can never be changed. It never go back. Human communication is irreversible. How many of y'all have heard the phrase, you can't unring a bell? Nobody has heard the phrase, you can't unring a bell. Okay, let me ask you a question, and this is a spouse walks into a room and says, I don't know, male or female, just a spouse walks into a room and says, do I look fat in this? And the other spouse goes, well, not as fat as some of your other clothes. Okay? How many of y'all have been involved in conversations where you say something and then the first thing is, yeah, well, you look more like your mother every day. I wish I hadn't said that. Oh my God, because you're screwed now. Okay? You can't take that back. Your engagement has changed that conversation. It changed the social context, changed the environment, and changed the participants. Okay? Everybody understand that? So it is a constantly changing, evolving cultural context and environment. Okay? A couple of things real quick before we take off. We've got 2 minutes left, so don't everybody start slamming things up. Number 1, human communication exists in a social context. If we did not have a social context, I would not be able to speak to you. We could not communicate. We have to have some sort of agreed upon context. Human communication is irreversible. Okay, once I say something, it's out there. I can't pull it back. And you see politicians, this happens all the time. Okay? Disc jockeys are really big on this too. They make some sort of stupid comment and then they can't understand why 24 hours later they got fired. All right? It has rules. It is a learned behavior. Anybody know what the one universal nonverbal communication, the nonverbal sign is what we refer to it as? Anybody know what the one universal nonverbal goes across all cultures? What? No, not the head nod, because that means nothing to in the Middle East. Yeah. Babies do this all over the world. Smile. Deaf, blind babies will smile. And they have no cultural context for that. Nobody knows why. Okay? And language is arbitrary. What we refer to as subject-sign relationships, we're going to talk about language in detail later on, but you have to strive to make your language as unarbitrary as possible and as precise as possible. Okay, we got, 8 seconds over. Anybody have any questions? Oh, question in the back? Okay. Come up, do it in just a second. Okay, I'm looking for him. Okay, if you weren't here last week, please make sure you grab a syllabus and an addendum. Other than that, we will see you guys on Wednesday. Thursday. Whatever.